lot of people, it's kind of like Hollywood. So even though I have not put any light in here at all, totally illuminated, right? It's like that when they're in a cave in the movie you're watching, you're like, where the hell's all the light coming from? They're in a cave. Just happens to be bright, right? So that's kind of how this is. It has what they refer to as default lighting schemes. So these are lighting that occur in this viewport in order to create a material effect, but are not actually coming from or going to anywhere. The frustrating part is that when you render, you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, it must be coming from over here somewhere, right? I can see the shadowing on the wall. Yep, except for this shadow over here that's in the exact opposite direction. So it really is quite random. If you want to add in your own light, that comes over in this region here.
Create light.
So it actually has a sun status, and if I click that, you're going to notice that it starts to really wash this thing out. You can adjust these. You can actually go into this little sun location. You can give it a date, which is pretty awesome. So like time of the year, more intense, less intense. You can actually give it a time of the day, which is also pretty cool. You could do like dawn or dusk or high noon. And you can, if you wanted to get crazy, you can actually go to location and it will pull up. All right, it won't pull up. Huh. Oh, right here. The geographic location. Why are you compressed? So it'll give you the geographic location of this thing. You can see that this is Pacific time zone. It gives you the latitude and longitude. That's kind of weird. That's not working correctly.
That's glitchy.
Huh. Anyway, apparently on every version but here, I don't know why that is. That used to be there. It would give you the ability to actually put in your location. So you could say, like, you know, you were in the Caribbean islands and put that thing up, and it would actually demonstrate how that sun would be at that time from that angle. It's pretty cool. Again, I don't know that it's really applicable for most of the things, but it is kind of neat. So when you render this with the sun on, you're going to notice that it gets really washed out. So here's how this goes. I think that most people understand the shadowing and the washout from light. Shadowing is, of course, the really black, and the washout is the really white. So it essentially erases all of those things. Most of that occurs, you can see here, I've just hit the edge of this wall and floor. Most of that occurs because of the size of the room. So not everybody was here, but when Juan and Curly were here, they were asking, how big could I make this room? Could I make it any size I want? And you certainly can, right? The downside of that, of course, is if you make a 12-inch by 12-inch room,
No, 12 foot.
then you put the sun on, it's going to be like a dollhouse, right? It's going to be super, super bright. But if you made a 12-foot by 12-foot room, then it's going to look kind of balanced, okay? So you have to kind of keep in mind when you're building things, what have you done? And that's a really common thing with students. They're like, this is totally messed up. I don't understand. It's so washed out. I'm like, how big did you make it? I don't know. Annotate it. Oh, it's 9. That's 9 inches. Think about that just for a second. It's like the width of your hand. That's how big your whole room is. Okay? So that's pretty small to turn on the sun, right? So anyway, you gotta kind of keep that stuff in mind, is when you're operating with these lights, all of those things are relevant. So I'm just gonna flip that guy off for now. So let's talk about these. Create light is pretty, I think, self-explanatory. The problem about it is that it's a split button. The top is just to activate it. The bottom of it is going to give you the ability to create other kinds of light. So point light is very similar to what you would think of as a traditional table or floor lamp. It's going to come from a small source. It's going to diffuse quite quickly, right? Just like a regular bulb would. And it's going to display on a wall or a floor, depending on what you've shined it on, according to the rules that you think should be for a traditional light. The other ones, I think, operate a little bit different. Spotlight, again, fairly self-explanatory. It's going to give you the ability to create a fairly intense light and then point it at a direction, which is really cool. Like some people have made like pool tables and they want to direct it right at the pool table. They have a pool light over top and they're like downward, not diffused out, but specifically at the table. So that's for that guy. Distance light, again, fairly self-explanatory. This would be like a parking lot light. So again, you're gonna be fairly intense, but it's gonna diffuse out very quickly, so that it can be from a long way away and throw a ton of light, but not at anything specific, like a spot. It's gonna be like you can see the outline. Yeah, you can see the outline of the spotlight, like you're on stage kind of thing, and you have that like big white circle behind you. That's what the spotlight looks like. The distance light is gonna look more diffused, like a parking lot. So you can't really see like a defined ring, it's just kind of like out there. The last one of these guys is a web light, and the only way I can really describe effectively how a web light works is it's an artificial sun. So it's less intense than the sun. You can control it with all the parameters of a regular light, which you'll see here in a second, but it also gives you the ability to just give general light without pointing it at anything at all. It's just kind of like, it's all bright now, okay? So you can kind of think of it like a sun you can control, which is kind of nice, because I have two that I can't. So, when you get in here, we're gonna choose a point light first. So I'm gonna put a point light, and what I've done here is I've actually created a light bulb. So you can kind of see right here. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah.
Wait,
So
did you have to make the shape of that?
Yep. And just revolve it around. Yep. So let me see. Actually, I wrote that way anymore. All right. So if I want to put a light in my light bulb, I'm going to go choose a point light. I'm going to make sure that I'm in wireframe. I think it's much easier to attach in wireframe. So let me just cycle over to that guy. And I'm going to go create light, point, and I want to attach it. See that little glyph? That little orange guy that travels with my cursor now? I want to attach that to something. You could certainly attach it to the top, the middle, the bottom, wherever you want. I'm going to put mine in the middle, and once I click, you're going to notice a menu that flies out. It gives me the ability to name this thing, give it an intensity factor. It defaults to 1, which you'll see here in a second again. Talk about the status, and then a whole bunch of other stuff that you're like, what the hell does that mean? I don't do anything with this at this point. I'm going to set it down. I just click the glyph and go to exit. That's all I do. Okay, so again, let me show you. I'm going to go 2D wireframe, point light. I'm going to click where I want it to attach, just the object snap, and exit. That's it. And the reason I do that is because right now this means nothing to me because I'm in wireframe. So even if I went and started screwing around with it, I'd have no idea what it's doing. It'd just be like, oh, here's some random settings that don't mean anything. I can go back after I've put that light in, and I can flip over to realistic, and you're going to notice here that it just turned on the light.
That is a pretty bright light.
Super
that's
bright.
yeah.
Is that LED?
Yeah.
Super LED.
That's a spotlight.
So at this point, I want to control that thing, right? That's kind of a problem. It's overwhelming. And if I go into render, it's not great there either, as you can see.
It's washing out a lot.
Yeah, it's kind of like washing out my lamp, actually. The whole bottom, it's like
Not
this
part of your
missing
table.
piece, right? So I definitely need to adjust that. And like the dimension style manager, it uses this little corner. It's like the most important thing is how to adjust the properties of this light. So we'll bury it in this little tiny corner. So I'm going to use that guy, and as you can see, it opens up this palette. Okay, so it's the little dude right in the corner there. Opens up that palette, and you can see that I have now point light 2, because I created one and deleted it. You probably saw it. That's why it's number 2. And if I right click on these guys, I can go to properties. And it opens, I'm just going to slide this over so you can see. It opens this same guy. And if you notice, name, type, status, intensity factor, remember all these guys from that initial menu? Now it kind of means something though, because I have a light to look at and reference. So that's why I just go to exit, because now I can go back and mess with these things and see it as it's occurring. So I want
40
to
watt.
take a look at,
40 watt light.
yeah. I want to go and name this thing and the reason I do that is because I want to know which one I'm controlling later. Especially for people, I had a student a couple years ago here that decided they were going to create a dance floor. I don't know why. So they created this dance floor, had a bar and stools. It was really cool. It had a jukebox. That was legit. And they decided they wanted to put lights all the way around the perimeter of it.
Nice.
Like 50 of them. So I was like, which ones do you want to turn on and off? I don't know. Let's try number 3. I don't know where that is, right? So as you can imagine, you're gonna click each one through the light list. Like when you click on them, they reference what they are. You can see the glyph illuminates there. But you're clicking through 50 of them. You're like, there's number 27, right? Keep going. I want to turn the intensity on that one down. So I really prefer to label these things. You know, when you get so many of them after a while, you're right. What do you call them, right? I mean, you have 50 lights. Letters, I mean, it's still a pain. So
L50.
yeah. So I would recommend you do change that. Don't just leave it at point light, because it'll be like which point light kind of thing after a while.